Hi there, it's Michael Cowan here from in Hindsight, part of the No Picket Fence series, and today I'm chatting to Sheraan Amod. How are you doing, Sheraan? And firstly, just thanks for taking the time out. I know you're really busy, and just setting this up has been quite a challenge for you, so thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Michael. Thank you
Excellent.
for having me today on your program.
No, it's good to have you, and certainly when I did a bit of background digging on you, there seems to be a lot of information on you as an entrepreneur, and I'm excited to chat to you because, in comparison to a lot of the other entrepreneurs, I think you've walked a bit of a different path. And if I can just give a bit of a background here, you describe yourself as a techno marketer, entrepreneur, and a social networking evangelist, if I read correctly on Crunchbase. And you're the CEO of Personera. Personera.com. Sorry. Which is really a web-to-print technology startup. Do you want to give us a bit of a background on Personera and how you got to Personera and what you guys do?
Absolutely. Personera is the first photo products platform based on Facebook. In a nutshell, we're in the photo business. We take Facebook content, of course now the world's #1 source for online photos, and turn it into creative, customizable products such as photo books, calendars, t-shirts, mugs, etc. for consumers and brands. We work with brands for their promotional products marketing programs, and we work with consumer-facing brands for merchandising, such as sports teams, universities, etc., etc.
Okay.
Part of our business model for Personera is we do a variety of things. It's a global business, primarily focused on the US and European market. And we license our software to a variety of different kinds of marketing agencies, and they use it to offer products and services to their customers. So we're a software company based on Facebook, and what comes out of using our software are these delightful real-world goods.
Oh, that's fantastic. And in terms of your background, I see you started as a young entrepreneur. You started Traffic Student Networks, and you've had some fantastic achievements, and I've really got to compliment you. You've won the FMB and Enable Us Business Award there. You were part of the Diplo Foundation at the UN Internet Governance in Rio de Janeiro. That was in 2007.
Yes, yeah.
Tell us about that. That must have been a fascinating experience.
Well, Michael, I've always been very interested in technology and the internet sector. So my background personally is I was really a geek, very into software. I started out as a software developer, like many people, just building things, and that interest has never subsided in my life. And as I grew older and entered university, I started thinking about other ways to use my other interests, which was marketing and communicating with people, while staying in the internet sector. And it kind of serendipitously led me to this organization called Diplo Foundation that was doing internet governance leadership programs in the internet space in conjunction with a variety of other global NGOs. And they're based in Europe. And I participated completely online with a group of young people that were invited to create a strategic paper to be presented at the UN at something called the Internet Governance Forum, where the world authorities such as ICANN convene to discuss the state of the internet and how the laws around it may change. And I was just very fortunate to have my ideas taken seriously and be able to join a group of very exciting people from around the world to present those ideas at a massive UN conference of 5,000 or 7,000 attendees. So that was a great experience. It was a dip into the world of non-profit work and NGOs.
Okay.
I believe that UN work gives us a taste for what's out there in our sectors beyond just business. So that was the reason I did that. It was a lot of fun.
But that must have given you a lot of confidence going forward as an entrepreneur to be able to get onto an international platform. And you also did this at the International Youth Leadership Conference in Prague. I mean, I do think one of the biggest challenges entrepreneurs have is to get up every morning and to keep on fighting the fight. I mean, that must have given you a huge, it must have been like taking crack cocaine for entrepreneurship, just giving you that confidence and the belief in yourself. I mean, what kind of impact did that have on you?
I always say that international exposure is so highly recommended for young people. More than anything else, what it does is it shows you that as a South African, a
Yeah.
lot of those securities that we have are unfounded. And when we go overseas, regardless of the platform, leadership, work, development, business, speaking in public, it doesn't matter what the platform is. I think what we learn is that we've been highly educated. We understand how to speak English and present ourselves in a manner that is world-class and absolutely as professional as the best of the rest of the world. And that's what I came up feeling. It increased my confidence because I realized that we were as good or better than everyone else. And it's good to see, as a South African, other South Africans doing the same thing. So as a confidence builder, absolutely, it gives you a lot of faith in the ability to do things at the global level when one realizes that people from the United States or from France or elsewhere are no smarter than we are, not necessarily even better educated. So we need to let go of a lot of those insecurities and just do our best out there.
Okay, because one of the key things I really am excited about chatting to you about is your approach and where you guys are going. You are very different from a guy who's trying to set up, say, for example, a KFC franchise in terms of being an entrepreneur or trying to set up a local operation here. You've been very successful in raising capital overseas, and you really are a tech startup in a first world economy. How has that impacted you, and how do you feel the opportunities are for South Africans to achieve this? Because you suddenly look at trying to achieve this for yourself and the access to markets and what have you. How have you managed to achieve this, and what has the impact been?
Achieving a global business growth for a startup, starting a technology company in South Africa and trying to commercialize it internationally is a difficult thing to do. If it was easy, a lot of people would be doing it. So one needs to understand that the challenges ahead are primarily, I'd say, a fewfold. On the one hand, one has to create a product that global markets are willing to accept. So you've got to be innovative in a number of ways. I think in that sense, South Africans are capable. The more difficult aspect is getting credibility and being taken seriously in those markets and having an actual channel to commercialize your product. And that's what takes time. Personally,
Yes.
I've done that by formalizing partnerships with organizations like Xerox Corporation and Facebook that gives us credibility and access to market overseas. And the third thing is, yes, it almost certainly will require capital, and one needs the ability to raise capital and get investors excited and interested in their business, and in it for the long haul as well, because these things never happen quickly. So the challenges are absolutely there, and there's many speed bumps along the way. It's not impossible, Michael. Nothing's impossible.
No, absolutely.
I think that the reason we manage this is simply, I'm not going to share anything new here. It's pure perseverance and commitment to a vision to try and do something. And we've had many setbacks and many occasions where we could have considered throwing in the towel, or were told by other people to throw in the towel and pack it up. And I think the job of the entrepreneur is to think critically about their vision and their dream and decide if it motivates them.
Yeah.
And continually assess that. And if the answer that they keep coming up with is that their dream seems to make sense, they're motivated by it, and they're willing to persevere, then there's no reason to give up. And by continually pushing and pushing, you can actually make things happen. You can get the partnerships, you can raise the money, you can build the right product, and you can enter the market. So it comes down to the entrepreneur at the end of the day and the resilience of the entrepreneur. It's possible. It's just not easy.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is the story of the entrepreneurial path. But in terms of raising that capital, how did you go about it? Because, it's not like you can suddenly go to New York and go to one of these VC kind of round operations that they set up there. Did you have to work through organizations like Silicon Cape, for example, or was it simply through connections that you had? How did you go about doing it? Or did you just hit a lucky break somewhere along the line?
I think that it's a combination of luck and effort. Raising capital is a combination of those two things. Where the luck comes in is that it's difficult to control the timing at what point an investor has money or does not have money. And an entrepreneur can approach a very valid investor and a credible investor who's not looking to make investments at that point in time, and that's no indictment of the entrepreneur. So that's the luck factor. I think that where entrepreneurs need to be prepared to make their own luck is that they say that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. So entrepreneur is well prepared with a strong business plan, with a real product that they believe in, and they're not taking a chance. They walk into every single meeting, and there's always a high rejection rate, expecting that they credibly can raise capital. When the lucky break comes along, they'll be prepared to take advantage of the opportunity. And my story is similar. I knew that Personera had to raise some capital to get off the ground, and I started to knock on doors. I started reaching out to people, and my first true angel investor that brought a significant amount of capital into the company was Vinnie Lingham, the well-known entrepreneur behind South African successes like Clicks to Customers, startups like Yola, etc. And he had a profile online. I tracked him down. I literally crashed one of the parties he was throwing for his and I forced him to give me a minute, which he did. And I think that entrepreneurs recognize another entrepreneur that's hungry. And he gave me the minute, and the minute turned into a lot more than that. It turned into our first R1 million angel investment round with his partners. And really, when I think of how we've gone about raising venture capital from a variety of sources since then, over the years, everything has stemmed from that moment. And the knock-on effect, someone willing to give you a chance and write you a check, and then it's up to the entrepreneur to prove themselves and prove the confidence. In my opinion, capital raising, it starts with having a very credible plan that you believe in and knocking on doors until somebody gives you enough time to get lucky.
Yeah, and success breeds success, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So are your investors happy with you?
That's a great question. I hope so. But speaking to them, I think that as a business grows, there's a lot of complexity. So yes, I believe they're happy. Does that mean that they've always been happy with me? No, absolutely not. And does that mean that there's been times where they've been ecstatic? Yes, as well. Things change. Entrepreneurship is a roller coaster, and the development of a startup is a roller coaster. And I think that the investors are as subject to that roller coaster experience as the entrepreneur is as well, as the staff are. So all the entrepreneur can do is to communicate maturely, professionally, and very often with their investors so that they don't get any surprises. I think that's the best thing an entrepreneur can do. And if an entrepreneur does that and is responsive and professional and communicative, investors will respect them and invest in them again in the future.
Okay. And in terms of the opportunities for South Africans in the global space, if you look at your product, and it's very difficult to kind of try and do an apples for apples comparison here, but what are the opportunities? And really in that context, how dependent are we on the international markets like Europe and the States? Because heck, there are a lot of people there that can buy your products and services in comparison to what we've got here, and their disposable income is a heck of a lot more than it is here. In terms of a business like yours, how dependent are you on these markets?
In the internet business, which is where my experience is in, South African companies creating software and internet-based business models are always going to be, in my opinion, incredibly connected and somewhat dependent for success on international markets, because there's a much larger base of consumers in the United States, in Europe, and the first world. So for Personera, we license our software. We're based on Facebook, so in some way our value is connected to the number of Facebook users in the world. And out of 850 million users, about 2.5 are South African. So that gives you an idea of where we need to be thinking in terms of as we grow our business. That's not true for all South African technology companies in general, though. I believe that web-based internet businesses are largely going to want to expose themselves to foreign markets. But in Africa, there's a lot of opportunity in mobile technology and in the other areas that are often less focused on in the first world. So we're talking about something such as a Mixit can become very successful here and grow hugely in South Africa and use that as a base for growing elsewhere, which is not really ideal for the US market. So there's obviously some opportunities that are very local that South Africans can take advantage of in the tech sector as well.
Okay, that's fantastic, because that was a bit of a loaded question, trying to get you to compare apples with apples there. If I can bring the conversation back to a South African context, how much of a challenge do you have in the environment? Because certainly when we speak to a lot of entrepreneurs is that they do have a lot of problems with government legislation, labor issues, and what have you. And certainly at the end of the day, the only hand at the end of an entrepreneur's, well, the entrepreneur has is at the end of his arm. You know, they've got to get up and take responsibility for their lives and make it happen. How much of an impact do these kind of traditional challenges that entrepreneurs face impact your business?
Right. I think if we speak about government and regulatory challenges for entrepreneurs in South Africa versus elsewhere in the world, there's a few things we need to consider. I believe that for businesses started and operating solely within the South African market, in the South African context, there's, aside from the tax we pay, which is probably high, there's not a lot of government intervention or restriction placed in the way we can do our business and succeed here. So I think that for people staying within the country, there's not a lot to worry about. Where it becomes tricky is if you're importing product. Obviously, we as South Africans face a high number of restrictions, so there's that. In Personera's case, we've generated intellectual property in South Africa, and a software product is built in South Africa, and we license that product to international customers, and they pay us from overseas. So the Reserve Bank controls around foreign currency and being paid certainly creates an admin burden in our business and a financial burden in trying to manage cash flows from foreign shores. And I think that essentially as a high-level view for entrepreneurs, if one is trying to build a global business from South Africa, then the government restrictions, the Reserve Bank restrictions and regulations in this country far exceed those that our competitors face in other developed world nations, such as the United States, for example. Yeah. So that makes life more difficult for us. I think the role of government, I think some attention needs to be put on this, because really government should primarily get out of the way of the entrepreneur. They perform a valuable role in society, but I think as entrepreneurs building businesses and trying to create wealth and create employment, etc., the role of the government is to provide as little friction as possible and to stay out of our way, and where they can, help us as well. And I think there's probably some distance to be traveled for local businesses operating internationally in that regard. And there are some challenges for us to solve.
Okay.
The good news, Michael, is that I believe that they are slowly being solved. There's been landmark rulings in IP, for example, and I believe that we're on the right path. I absolutely believe we're on the right path, that within 10 years, the landscape is going to be easier to operate in than it is today.
Well, that's really encouraging, and I'm sure also for you the broadband issue will also be a lot better by then as well, which will also have a huge impact, I'm sure, on the quality of service that you actually deliver. How much of an impact does our infrastructure have on your service delivery?
For an internet-based business or a software business, I think our level of connectivity, we can actually measure proportionally our level of connectivity to our productivity level and the amount of revenue we generate. So what affects us, I'd say, the most in South Africa is occasional downtime. We don't have the same reliability of our infrastructure as you do elsewhere in the world. So if we have a power failure, or if our internet suddenly goes off, and that happens one day in 3 months, we've lost a significant amount of productivity relative to our competitors. So that's the largest frustration. I think the second one is obviously the speed, but more than the speed, because we can get decently fast internet, it's the cost that we pay for that speed. So a 10 or 100 megabyte line at an office is possible, but we're paying a high cost, a higher cost than our competitors. And a personal bugbear for me is that I obviously interact heavily with with customers. So at night, late into the night, I'm on calls and I'm doing webinars and video calls, and the quality of my bandwidth at home becomes very important for running that business. So I think we have a long way to go in bringing incredibly fast internet into people's homes in the country. Again, I think it's getting better over time. But no, we're not at the first world level in that regard yet.
Okay, fantastic. And really just to wrap up this, because I could go on for a whole lot longer, but I think, you know, the important part about being an entrepreneur is a mindset. And if I had to put a young entrepreneur in front of you today and say, you got to see this guy in a year's time, what would your key advice for this young chap at a personal level? What do they need to go and do over the next year, in your opinion, to achieve and to be successful? So when they sit down in front of you in a year's time, they've actually made a success of what they're trying to do. What would those key points and key takeouts would be for you?
I think that to give some advice for a first-time entrepreneur looking to achieve some kind of success in a short space of 1 year, my advice would be very simple, and I would look for the same thing, and that is an obsessive commitment to a few goals.
Yeah. Okay.
It needs to be whatever the goal is. It could be to develop a product, to sell that product, to find partners, to close the deal. These are the things that we often stress about as business people and entrepreneurs. Write them down and make them very few for the year. I would say less than 5, and split them up into quarterly targets and go after them obsessively. So I always like to see, and I believe that success, when I look at people far more successful than myself and who've achieved real things, they wouldn't accept no for an answer. They executed obsessively against their plan, and they were incredibly resourceful. So it's that dogged commitment to a set of goals that I think differentiates the casual entrepreneur versus who has a dream but may not achieve it, versus the committed entrepreneur that's going to do everything it takes to try to get somewhere. And in the first year, it often takes a lot more energy than any of the other years as well.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I don't know if you know Steve Pressfield, who wrote The War of Art. Sorry, getting confused here with Sheraan. And he makes this point. The person who actually wakes up and decides to commit to his art as opposed to doing his art, that's the difference between a true artist and just a doer. And it's very easy to get swayed by the idea of doing rather than the art of committing to what you're actually doing.
One thing I would add, Michael, is for first-time entrepreneurs, our biggest enemy is ourselves. Because there's no boss, there's no manager, there's no investors looking for performance. So in that year one, the reason most ideas never get off the ground is it's too hard to let the reflection in the mirror be critical and admit to that person who is, for all purposes, our conscience, that we're not meeting our goals, that we're ignoring things, that we're letting our job make us too tired to put in those 4 hours every day after work. And we are easy on ourselves. And it's easy to think that way when there's no other accountability in place. So I think the entrepreneur that's able to set a goal and be accountable to themselves is always going to find a way to succeed at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. It comes down to self-belief and an attitude. And as you say, the commitment. Sheraan, thank you so much for taking this time out to have a chat to us. I really do appreciate it. And all the best with your endeavors and with what you guys are doing. I think it's fantastic, and I think it's a great example to what can be achieved within South Africa. And hats off to you guys. Well done. Really impressive stuff.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I wish all the entrepreneurs watching this and listening to this the very best of luck with their endeavors as well.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Thank you.